You stood at the counter on a Saturday afternoon, watching your mother tear a piece of white bread in half. She spread it with bacon grease, shook a little salt on top, and handed it to you like it was nothing. That was a snack in the 1950s. No wrapper, no brand name, no recipe card. Just whatever the kitchen had, and a mother who knew how to stretch it. Poor families across America turned pantry scraps into treats their kids never forgot. Crackers with peanut butter and a drizzle of honey, cold biscuits smeared with butter and brown sugar, saltines crumbled into a glass of milk. None of it cost more than a few cents, and none of it survived. Number 47 was so common in southern mill towns, children would trade their school lunches for it. And number 9 uses an ingredient most families today would throw straight in the trash. Here are 60 forgotten poor man snacks from the 1950s that no one makes today.
Since their grand debut in 1930, Twinkies have danced their way into the hearts of Americans, becoming a beloved snack legend. Their ability to adapt to ingredient shortages during wartime highlighted the brand's resilience and ingenuity. Originally filled with banana cream, a wartime banana shortage necessitated a switch to vanilla cream, a change that contributed to the snack's iconic status. Twinkies became known for their longevity and adaptability, surviving changes in consumer preferences and even a brief discontinuation in 2012. Today, they remain a beloved treat, embodying the comfort and nostalgia of American snack food with their golden sponge cake and creamy filling, continuing to delight generations of snackers.
Number 25, saltine crackers and milk. This was the snack that said you had almost nothing left, and you were still going to eat something tonight. A handful of saltines crumbled into a bowl, cold milk poured over the top. Some people added a spoonful of sugar. Some added a pinch of cinnamon. Most added nothing at all. In the 1930s, families across the Midwest fed their children this before bed because it was the cheapest thing in the house that still felt like a meal. A box of saltines cost 19 cents in 1940. Milk was 13 cents a quart. For a senior living alone in the 1970s or 1980s, this was not breakfast and not dinner. It was the thing you ate at 9 o'clock at night when the hunger came back and you did not have the energy to stand at the stove again. You sat at the table with that bowl, and the sound of the crackers softening in the milk was the only sound in the house. It was simple. It was enough. And it asked nothing of you except a bowl and a spoon. But years before any hillbilly snack came wrapped in cellophane, your grandmother was already in the garden eating tomatoes off the vine with a pocket knife and a salt shaker from her apron pocket. Sun-warmed tomatoes halved over the palm, salted directly on the red flesh. No kitchen, no dishes. The salt drew out the juice immediately. You ate fast, standing between the rows, the warm liquid running down your wrist. Appalachian families grew open-pollinated varieties passed from neighbor to neighbor for generations. Softer, thinner-skinned, more acidic than anything bred for shipping. The tomato bled when you cut it. The salt shaker was always in her apron. When she stopped going to the garden herself, nobody thought to put one in their pocket before walking out there. Chocolate milk made with Hershey's syrup was never just chocolate milk. It was a ratio, and everyone who grew up making it had their own and was willing to argue about it. You tilted the squeeze bottle, counted to a number, and stirred until the dark pool at the bottom lifted. Stop too soon, and you'd drink thin milk, then hit pure sweetness at the end. Hershey's syrup had been sold in tin cans since 1926, but in 1979 the company switched to the plastic squeeze bottle, the only version every 80s kid knew. The school cafeteria's chocolate milk was too uniform. The kind you made at home had variation, and you learned to correct for it pour by pour. Most kitchens don't keep a squeeze bottle anymore. The muscle memory for the count has gone quiet. Number 19, leather britches. This was not a snack in the way a modern person thinks of a snack. But in the early 1960s, mountain families pulled leather britches off the string hanging from the porch ceiling and chewed on them the way a person today might chew on beef jerky. Leather britches were green beans, threaded onto a long piece of string with a needle, then hung to air dry for weeks. The beans shriveled and turned brown and leathery. The name came from the way they looked, like tiny pairs of leather pants on a clothesline. The practice likely came from the Cherokee, though German settlers in the Palatinate had a similar tradition. By the 1960s, they were a winter staple in the mountains of North Carolina, Virginia, and Kentucky. When you were hungry between meals, you pulled a few off the string and chewed. They were tough and earthy and tasted like summer gone quiet. Most families kept several strings drying at once, each one holding enough beans to last a month. That was the whole point of them, not flavor, survival. The knowledge that when the snow came and the garden was dead and the nearest store was 12 miles of frozen road away, there was still food hanging from the ceiling. In Watauga County, North Carolina, a woman named Ora Mae Ward strung leather britches on her front porch every August for 40 years. Her grandchildren would sit on the steps and help thread the beans, and she would tell them stories about the winters when the only vegetables came from that string. Those strings are gone from most porches now. The skill went with them. The grandchildren who sat on those steps are grandparents themselves now, and most of them have never threaded a single bean. But the taste, for anyone who remembers it, never left. It never will. Number 16. Raw potato slices with salt. A potato pulled from the root cellar, rinsed, sliced thin with a paring knife, laid out on a plate, and salted. If you grew up in farm communities across the Plain States, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, raw potato slices were the simple, free snack that appeared when everything else was put away and supper was still 2 hours out. Children ate them standing at the kitchen counter. The potato tasted starchy and faintly sweet when truly fresh. The salt brought out something that tasted almost buttery. No cooking, no heating, no waiting. A 10-year-old could make this in under 3 minutes. Potatoes kept in the root cellar from October through February, the most reliable thing in a house where other items ran out. A 10-pound bag of potatoes cost 49 cents in 1963. That is a month's worth of afternoon snacks for almost nothing. Nobody wrote this down as a recipe, and if your grandmother made it, she didn't need to. Number 23, tomato gravy on toast. Down through the rural South, tomato gravy on toast was the breakfast that kept whole families upright during the lean years. A can of crushed tomatoes hit a hot skillet greased with bacon drippings. A spoon of flour went in to thicken the pan. A splash of milk softened the acid into something closer to cream than sauce. 5 minutes later, the gravy was ladled across a slab of toasted bread, and a working man left for the field with something warm sitting in his stomach until noon. The dish was a fixture in Tennessee and Kentucky farmhouses through the 1930s and 1940s. The recipe traveled north when families moved up to Detroit and Akron for factory jobs. What kept it alive was the math. A 25-cent can of tomatoes fed a household of 6. The bread was day-old, the drippings were free, and the milk came from the neighbor's cow on trade. Number 19. Cabbage and salt pork. A head of cabbage cost 9 cents in 1963. A quarter pound of salt pork cost about 12 cents. Together in a single pot, covered with water and simmered for an hour, they became something that fed a table of 6 for under 25 cents total. In the German farming communities of central Missouri and the Czech settlements of South Texas, the pot liquor from the cabbage was considered as valuable as the cabbage itself. Children were given the broth in a cup like a drink. Nothing was left in the pot. That's how cheap and effective this meal was. The salt pork flavored everything it touched, and when you pulled it out after cooking, whatever meat clung to the bone was divided between the smallest children first. The woman at the pot didn't have to be told that. It wasn't discussed. It was understood. You fed the young ones from what was closest to the bone. Back in those days, that was just how it worked. She started them the night before. Always the night before. That rule had been passed down through Appalachian kitchens where dried lima beans were the difference between a full table and an empty one in winter. You soaked them overnight in cold water, and by morning they'd swelled to twice their size. She'd drain them and pack them into the slow cooker with the salt pork. Not bacon, not ham, but salt pork, the cured side meat that was the backbone of Appalachian cooking through the 19th and 20th centuries. 8 hours on low. The salt pork dissolved into the broth, releasing a deep, cured sweetness the beans alone could never produce. The soup was thick, pale, and filling in the way only bean soups are, the kind of full that lasted all day. She made it every winter without measuring a single ingredient. She knew when it was done by the smell from the kitchen and the specific way the steam moved when she lifted the lid. That knowing went with her. No recipe written down since has quite replaced it. Number 17. Cold fried chicken back. The piece of the bird nobody at the Sunday table fought over went into the pail on Monday. A textile mill weaver in Kannapolis in 1951 brought one cold chicken back wrapped in newspaper, salted heavy, eaten without a napkin. The skin had set hard from the night in the icebox, and the meat clung in shreds along the spine. You picked it apart with your fingers on a wooden spool over the canal. The bird had cost 49 cents on Saturday, fed 5 at supper, and still gave a man his Monday lunch. What most people miss about a chicken back is that it was the cheapest cut and the last cut to disappear. Vegetable fried rice was a quick and inexpensive meal that made use of leftover rice and seasonal or frozen vegetables. By stir-frying cold-cooked rice with onions, carrots, peas, and soy sauce, cooks could transform leftovers into a flavorful and filling dish. This meal was practical for families aiming to reduce waste and stretch limited food supplies. Vegetable fried rice was easy to prepare and customizable based on whatever ingredients were on hand, reflecting the adaptability needed in resource-conscious households. It also reflected influences from Asian cuisine that became increasingly familiar to Americans in the mid-20th century. This dish provided a balanced combination of carbohydrates and vegetables, making it a nutritious and satisfying option on a tight budget. Many remember vegetable fried rice as a tasty, no-fuss way to turn simple staples into a wholesome family meal. Stuffed cabbage rolls appeared on Christmas tables across immigrant communities, stretching small amounts of meat into dishes that fed entire families. The technique came from Eastern European traditions, adapted to Depression realities where ground meat was a luxury used sparingly. Cabbage leaves were blanched until pliable, then wrapped around filling of rice, onion, and whatever meat scraps the family could afford. Sometimes just tablespoons stretched through an entire batch. The rolls simmered for hours in tomato sauce, the long cooking tenderizing everything and melding flavors together. By Christmas dinner, each roll became a complete package of protein, grain, and vegetable. The aroma of simmering cabbage and tomatoes filled homes, announcing to neighbors that holiday meal was being prepared. Stuffed cabbage taught the art of stretching resources without sacrificing satisfaction, connecting families to heritage while solving the problem of feeding many mouths with little money. Tomato soup with grilled cheese was the rainy day classic that never failed to make kids feel warm from the inside out. The moment a storm cloud rolled in, kids would start hoping their mothers would make this exact combo because nothing else matched the feeling of dipping a buttery sandwich into a bowl of steaming soup. The soup usually came straight from a can, cheap and dependable, mixed with water or milk to make it smoother. As it heated, the rich tomato smell filled the room, promising comfort before you even took the first bite. Meanwhile, the grilled cheese sizzled in a pan, the bread crisping in butter until it turned that perfect shade of golden brown. When the cheese melted completely, stretching in strings when you pulled the sandwich apart, you knew dinner was going to be perfect. Kids could barely wait for the soup to cool down before dipping the sandwich into it, soaking up all that warmth and flavor in one bite. It was simple, cheap, and so easy that mothers could make it even on their most exhausted days. But it never felt tired or ordinary. It felt like kindness in a bowl. It tasted like being taken care of. Kids begged for this meal because it felt like a warm hug, the food equivalent of being wrapped in a blanket while the world outside stayed cold and gray. It was childhood comfort at its absolute best. Potato rarebit was one of the Depression's clever ways to make potatoes feel more special than they were. The base idea was to take mashed or sliced potatoes and top them with a thin sauce of cheese, milk, and spices. Cheese was often scarce, so the sauce was made with very small amounts stretched as far as possible, sometimes even flavored with mustard to give it more punch. The result was a dish that felt rich and indulgent, even though it used little more than potatoes and scraps of cheese. Families would bake or broil it to give the top a golden crust, making it even more appealing. It was filling, cheap, and versatile, perfect for serving a large family. Children especially loved when potatoes got transformed this way, since it was a rare chance to enjoy something creamy and flavorful. Potato rarebit may not be common today, but it was beloved back then. Cold spaghetti sandwiches were the proud invention of leftovers and late nights. You'd open the fridge, see a bowl of yesterday's spaghetti, and realize that bread was the only thing left. So you'd scoop the cold noodles right onto the bread, fold it over, and take a bite. It was messy, chewy, and surprisingly satisfying. The sauce soaked into the bread, turning it into something that didn't need reheating or plating. It became a classic among factory workers, college kids, and tired parents who didn't have the energy to reheat a pan. It might have looked ridiculous, but it worked. It was dinner without dishes. Cold spaghetti sandwiches were proof that comfort food doesn't have to make sense. It just has to make you full.
During the disco decade of the 1970s, space food sticks took off like a rocket, igniting dreams of interstellar travel with every bite. They bridged the gap between the fantasy of space exploration and everyday snacking, making them a product of their time. These nutritious, portable snacks were designed for astronauts, offering earthbound consumers the chance to experience a taste of space adventure. Although no longer in production, the legacy of space food sticks lives on as a symbol of a time when the final frontier seemed within reach, and snacks could be a part of that journey, blending nutrition with the thrill of exploration.
22. Tomato sandwich. 2 slices of white bread, a thick slice of garden tomato, a smear of mayonnaise, salt, and pepper. That was the summer snack that defined the American South for 100 years. You did not cook anything. You did not heat anything. You assembled it in under a minute and ate it standing over the kitchen sink while the juice ran down your wrist. For a senior with a tomato plant on the back porch, this was free food from June through September. Even without a garden, a single tomato from the farmer's market cost $0.25 in the 1970s. The bread was already in the house. The mayonnaise was already in the refrigerator. The whole thing came together faster than you could describe it. In small towns across Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, church ladies brought tomato sandwiches to widows and widowers during the summer months. They wrapped them in wax paper and left them on the porch because they knew the person inside might not answer the door. That was not charity. That was knowing. Honeysuckle grew along every fence line and ditch bank in Appalachia, and any mountain child knew the exact method. Pinch the green base between 2 fingers, pull the stamen through slowly from the bottom until the tiny, clear bead of nectar appeared at the tip. Touch it to your tongue. 1 drop. Pure, concentrated sweetness, unlike anything sold. You worked the vine for 10 minutes for a tablespoon total, and it was worth every minute. Japanese honeysuckle spread through the South and Appalachian mountains so thoroughly it was classified as invasive. But to mountain children, it was just the free snack on every fence all summer, requiring only patience and the knowledge of how to pull the stamen without losing the drop. Nobody taught it formally. You watched an older child once, and the motion transferred completely. Your grandmother could strip a vine faster than any child, her fingers recalling 60 years of practice. The vine still grows on those same fence lines. Nobody works it for nectar anymore. Before instant pudding packets made it a 5-minute job, stovetop vanilla pudding was something you watched someone make from scratch. Milk, sugar, cornstarch, a wooden spoon that never stopped circling the bottom of the pot. You stood at the stove because you were allowed to lick the spoon when it was almost done, and because watching the pudding thicken, going from thin and liquid to thick and glossy, was a kind of slow kitchen magic. By the 1980s, Jell-O instant mixes had taken over most households, but in some kitchens the pudding still came off the stove warm. You ate it straight from the pot before it reached a bowl. Hot vanilla pudding has a depth that the cold, set version loses entirely. The woman who made it that way understood that. She is gone now, and the pot sits unused in a cabinet somewhere. Number 21. Fried apple pies. In the hollows of southern Appalachia, women dried apples on racks in the late summer sun, spreading the slices across old window screens propped up on sawhorses. Those dried apples went into a jar and lasted through the winter. When someone wanted a snack, a woman would soak a handful in water until they softened, cook them down with sugar and cinnamon, then fold the filling into circles of biscuit dough and fry them in a skillet of hot lard. The edges went golden and crisp. The filling turned soft and sweet and warm. Some families called them half-moon pies because of the shape. In Letcher County, Kentucky, a woman named Hazel Caudle was known to make 3 dozen on a Saturday morning and sell them for a dime apiece at the back door. They were gone before noon. Number 20. Lard and sugar bread. An open-faced slice of white bread spread with rendered lard and sprinkled with sugar. If you grew up in farm communities across Iowa, Illinois, and the hill country of Arkansas, this was the dessert that appeared when there was no dessert. The lard was always in the house because families kept their own hogs or bought it in 5-pound cans. Sugar cost about 8 cents a pound in 1965. Spread thin on lard-coated bread, a teaspoon of sugar went far and tasted richer than it had any right to. The lard kept the sugar from sliding off and melted slightly against the warmth of a hand. Historian Richard Willis recalled eating these on a Depression-era farm in Iowa, but the tradition carried well into the 1960s in households where the lard bucket never left the stovetop. Bread, fat, sugar. Your mother and grandmother both knew that was enough to get a child from 3 in the afternoon to supper time without complaint. Number 19. Government cheese melt. By 1981, the federal government was sitting on 560 million pounds of cheese, most of it stacked in limestone caves outside Kansas City and rented warehouses across the Midwest. The interest on storing all that dairy was running $1 million a day. That December, President Reagan signed the order that put the surplus on the move. 5-pound bricks of bright orange processed cheese, stamped with the seal of the United States Department of Agriculture, started landing at senior centers and church halls from Brooklyn to Bakersfield. The block came wrapped in waxed cardboard. The cut required a sharp knife and a steady hand. And the melt, when it hit a hot pan with 2 slices of buttered bread, became one of the defining suppers of the early 1980s. Working grandmothers who had raised children on Hoover stew now raised grandchildren on government cheese sandwiches. They sliced the brick a 1/2 inch thick. They buttered the bread on the outside. They pressed the sandwich down with a coffee can full of dried beans while the first side browned, then flipped it once and let the cheese pull into long, elastic strands. By 1984, the United States was storing 5 pounds of cheese for every American citizen, and 300 million pounds had moved through the Temporary Emergency Food Assistance Program. The cheese tasted nothing like cheddar and everything like comfort. It melted clean. It froze well. It kept in the icebox for months. Seniors who lived through the early Reagan years can still taste the first bite. The crust was burnished gold. The center was molten and slightly sweet, and the bill at the door said 0, because the block had come from a government finally admitting that letting food rot while families ate cold was not a policy any country could defend. Decades later, the recipe still works on a $5 block from the dairy case. Number 21. Creamed chipped beef on toast. The military gave it a name that cannot be printed here. Mothers kept it clean. Thin slices of dried beef, salt-cured and almost leathery, torn into strips and dropped into a white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk, poured over thick slices of white toast. That was supper. In working-class neighborhoods across Ohio and Pennsylvania, and in mill towns from the Piedmont to the Monongahela Valley, this was a weeknight staple from the 1940s all the way through the 1960s. A jar of dried beef cost 35 cents in 1965. It fed 4 people over toast. The roux had to be stirred constantly or it scorched, which is why every woman who made it stood at the stove the whole time. There were no shortcuts. The white sauce either came together smooth or it didn't. Most mothers could tell by the smell when it was right. They didn't use a timer, they just knew. That is a kind of skill you can't buy. In the early 1930s, in the makeshift camps the newspapers named Hoovervilles, supper sometimes came from a community pot. 1 hot dog split thin, a can of stewed tomatoes, elbow macaroni, and corn to stretch the whole thing further. Hoover stew, named bitterly for the president many blamed for the crash, documented in the Household Searchlight recipe book in 1931, was the official name for what families quietly made in those Depression kitchens. Government cheese replaced the hot dogs when relief packages arrived. Cabbage stood in for the corn when cans ran out. What stayed constant was the logic. One pot, low heat, whatever you had, enough for everyone. In a slow cooker, the macaroni softens in sweet tomato broth. The hot dogs give the pot a smoky warmth. It started as desperation. It ended as supper. Number 21. Boiled potato and salt in wax paper. A single Idaho potato boiled the night before in the same iron pot the family used for everything else, salted heavy with the rough kosher kind, and folded into a square of wax paper. A textile spinner at the Beaumont Mills in Spartanburg in 1934 ate one for lunch every weekday for 11 years. Her pay was $9 a week and her kitchen had no icebox until 1939. You carried your potato in a flour sack folded twice over, and you ate it lukewarm on the loading dock with the other women. Sometimes there was a pat of butter pressed into the center, sometimes a strip of cold bacon, sometimes a wedge of onion. But most days there was just salt and the potato. The potato cost a penny at the company store. That was your lunch from the day she started in the carding room at 14 until the day the spindle took her right index finger. Creamed spinach on toast was a popular frugal side dish that combined cooked spinach with a simple creamy sauce served over slices of toasted bread. This dish was affordable, using frozen or canned spinach mixed with milk or cream and thickened with flour or cornstarch to create a smooth, rich topping. The toasted bread provided texture and substance, turning a basic vegetable into a filling accompaniment suitable for any meal. Creamed spinach on toast was easy to prepare in large quantities, making it ideal for families seeking inexpensive ways to add nutrition and comfort to their dinners. It was often served alongside inexpensive proteins or eggs, reflecting the mid-century emphasis on hearty yet economical home cooking. This dish embodies the era's resourcefulness in stretching small amounts of vegetables to feed hungry households. Its creamy texture and mild flavor helped make spinach more appealing to children and adults alike. Today, it remains a nostalgic reminder of simple, satisfying meals from the past. Bread pudding transformed stale loaves into Christmas dessert, rescuing what would otherwise become waste and turning it into celebration. Every crust, every heel, every slice gone too hard to eat was saved throughout December until Christmas Eve arrived. The dried bread was torn into chunks, soaked in whatever milk the family could afford, then mixed with eggs, sugar, and precious spices like cinnamon and nutmeg. Baked until golden in cast-iron pans handed down through generations, the pudding emerged transformed from kitchen scraps into something resembling abundance. Families drizzled molasses or made simple sauces from butter and sugar to top their portions. The texture was both tender and substantial, the sweetness balanced by honest bread flavor. Bread pudding taught children that nothing should be thrown away, that creativity could rescue the humblest ingredients. This dessert carried Christmas forward when fancy cakes and store-bought sweets were impossible dreams for struggling households. Cane syrup ginger cookies were the winter sweets born from necessity, shaped by families who could not afford refined sugar but still wanted something warm and comforting. Cane syrup was cheaper, accessible, and kept well through the cold months, making it a trusted companion in countless kitchens. Grandma mixed it with flour, fat, and ground ginger, creating a soft dough that smelled like holiday spice even on ordinary afternoons. When the cookies baked, they spread into soft, chewy circles with edges that crisped just enough to snap gently under your teeth. The flavor was deep, warm, and earthy, the kind of sweetness that lingered rather than shouted. Families cherished these cookies because they brought joy without requiring ingredients that winter budgets could not handle. They tasted like generosity in lean times, a reminder that sweetness did not need to be extravagant to matter. Cane syrup ginger cookies were humble but powerful, a dessert that made cold days feel kinder. Ketchup sandwiches may sound like a joke today, but in the Depression era they were a quick meal for children and adults alike. With meat out of reach for many, a slice of bread spread thin with ketchup became lunch or even dinner. The tangy, sweet flavor gave the illusion of something more filling, especially when paired with a second slice of bread. Sometimes butter or margarine was added if available, but most of the time it was just bread and ketchup. While humble, it provided calories when little else was around, and children often looked forward to it simply because it tasted different from the usual plain bread. It was also portable, making it an easy option for workers or school lunches. Though it might not sound appetizing now, it kept hunger away for countless families. For many who grew up in the 1930s, ketchup sandwiches became an unforgettable part of their childhood survival. Boiled hamburger gravy on bread was a working-class miracle that filled bellies and stretched a single pound of beef for days. Instead of frying the meat, folks would boil it in water until it crumbled into soft bits, then stir in flour and a little grease to make a thick, savory gravy. It wasn't pretty, but it smelled like home, and it soaked right through white bread like a promise. Some called it poor man's stew, others called it Tuesday dinner, but it was the same everywhere, simple, hearty, and cheap. It was the kind of meal you made when the fridge looked bare, yet somehow everyone left the table satisfied. The gravy clung to your fingers, the bread got soggy, and no one complained because it tasted like comfort. If you were lucky, you added pepper or onions, but even plain, it hit the spot. This was survival cooking that didn't apologize for itself, just warm, heavy food for long days and tired hearts.
Imagine a dessert that defies gravity, layering itself into a trio of textures as if by magic. Launched into the culinary cosmos in 1969, Jell-O 1-2-3 became an instant classic, with its whimsical layers capturing the imagination of families nationwide. This innovative dessert offered a unique eating experience, from the airy and light top layer to the creamy middle, down to the classic Jell-O jiggle at the bottom. It epitomized the era's fascination with space-age technology, making dessert time a futuristic adventure. Although it has disappeared from store shelves, the legacy of Jell-O 1-2-3 endures, stirring nostalgia for a time when culinary creativity knew no bounds, and a simple dessert could captivate the imagination.
Number 19. Sardines on toast. A can of sardines opened and laid on a slice of buttered toast. That was the whole recipe. In the 1940s and 1950s, sardines were the cheapest source of protein on the grocery shelf. A can cost 10 cents. The fish were already cooked, already seasoned, already preserved. You did not need a refrigerator, a stove, or a single cooking skill. You needed a can opener and a piece of bread. For a senior living alone, sardines on toast solved every problem at once. No standing, no waiting, no dishes beyond one plate and one fork. The calcium in the soft bones was something most doctors now recommend specifically for aging adults, but the generation that ate sardines never knew the science. They just knew the price. A retired factory worker in Trenton, New Jersey, ate sardines on toast for lunch every day for 7 years. His wife had done the cooking before she died. He had never learned. Sardines were the only thing he could make without her. This was not just a snack for people who were frugal. This was a snack for people who were alone in a way that made cooking feel like a performance with no audience. The silence of a kitchen that used to have someone else in it changes the way food tastes. A can of sardines did not fix that silence, but it did not require you to pretend the silence was not there. You opened it, you ate it, you moved on. For millions of seniors in the decades after the war, that honesty was worth more than flavor. The tin can did not judge you for eating the same thing again. It did not ask why you stopped setting the table. It just fed you. And some days, that was enough to keep going. Cracklins in a paper bag were not pork rinds, and any mountain child would tell you so without blinking. Real cracklins came from hog butchering day, the skin and fat layer cut into squares, dropped into a boiling lard kettle, and cooked until they puffed and turned golden, the outer shell shattering when you bit through to a chewy, fatty center that tasted like concentrated smokehouse and fire. Shaken in a paper bag with salt while still hot, eaten by the handful while the kettle was still going. There was no second batch, only what came off that hog that day in that yard. The Cherokee and Appalachia had long rendered animal fat as both food and medicine, and European settlers adopted the total-use butchering practice. Fat became lard, skin became cracklins, bones became broth. Store-bought pork rinds are puffed with air and dusted with powder. Cracklins were dense, dark, bitter at the edges where the fat caramelized against the iron. The women who knew how to render them slow are mostly gone. The kettle rusted. Wonder Bread pinwheels required a rolling pin, a refrigerator, and patience, which is why they felt like an achievement when you got them right. You pressed the rolling pin across a fresh slice until it was almost paper thin, spread it to the edges with cream cheese or thin sliced ham, rolled it tight from one end, and refrigerated it for 20 minutes. Then out, sliced on a diagonal, each round holding its shape. Wonder Bread, introduced by the Taggart Baking Company of Indianapolis in 1921, was specifically engineered soft enough to compress without tearing. The softness critics mocked was the entire structural point. Whole wheat wouldn't roll. Sourdough shattered. The pinwheel was one of the few things a child in the 1980s could make from scratch that looked like party food. The technique required actual skill, feel for the right pressure, the right amount of filling, and once kitchens moved on, no one thought to teach it again. Number 17. Sorghum taffy. In the early 1960s, sorghum syrup was still the primary sweetener in many mountain homes. Refined white sugar was expensive. Sorghum was not. Families grew their own cane, pressed it in a horse-drawn mill, and cooked the juice down into a dark, thick syrup. When there was extra sorghum, the women made taffy. They boiled the syrup with a splash of vinegar until it reached the hard crack stage, poured it onto a buttered platter, and waited until it was cool enough to handle. Then the pulling started. Two people would stretch and fold the candy between them until it turned from dark brown to pale golden and went stiff. They snapped it into pieces and wrapped each one in wax paper. In the mountains of eastern Tennessee, communities held taffy pulling parties in the fall. Young men and women paired off to pull the candy together. It was one of the few socially acceptable ways for unmarried people to hold hands. The taffy was the excuse. The company was the point. Number 19. Fried biscuit donuts. In the coal mining communities of southwestern Virginia and the hollows of West Virginia, when a grandmother made biscuits, she sometimes fried a few extras. She pinched off rounds of biscuit dough and dropped them into hot lard in a cast iron pot until they puffed and turned golden. Then she shook them in a paper bag with powdered sugar or cinnamon sugar. They came out hot, dense, faintly sweet, with an outside that crackled and an inside that steamed when pulled apart. These weren't donuts the way anyone would buy in a shop. They had no holes, no glaze, no frosting. They were something better, warm, homemade, nearly free. And if you ever pulled one apart while it was still hot, you know exactly what that steam smelled like. And they smelled up the whole house when that cast iron pot got hot. Miners' wives had been making these since at least the early 1900s, and by the time the 1960s arrived, the recipe was still being passed down without ever being written. No cookbook taught it. A daughter learned it standing at the stove. A woman in Buchanan County, Virginia, described the recipe to Foxfire Field researchers in 1975 as simply, heat the grease, drop the dough, roll in sugar. That was the entire instruction. The lard she fried them in was left over from breakfast. The dough was whatever remained after the biscuits were cut. Nothing measured, nothing wasted. There is something worth understanding about food from coal country. It is not sentimental about itself. It did not need to be. The families who ate these fried biscuit donuts weren't romanticizing hard times. They were just finding a way to make something good out of what was in the kitchen on a light pay afternoon. The women who made these didn't call themselves resourceful. They called themselves mothers. And the children who grew up eating them, the people who are your grandparents now, those generations who are grandparents themselves now, remembered the taste for the rest of their lives. Number 20. Spam pan fry. Hormel rolled the first can of Spam off the line in Austin, Minnesota in 1937, and the country was waiting for it. By the time the Second World War landed, American kitchens had already worked out the simplest way to cook it. Slice it a 1/4 inch thick. Drop the slices into a dry cast iron pan over medium heat. Wait until the edges curl up and the center turns the color of pulled molasses. 2 minutes aside, no oil, no seasoning. The salt was already in the meat. Working families in the 1940s served the slices over fried potatoes for supper and tucked the leftovers into a lunch pail with mustard. By the 1950s, a 12-ounce can fed a family of 5 for under 50 cents. 3 slices, 1 onion, 1 potato. Supper for 2 in under 12 minutes. Number 24. Cornmeal mush with milk. A pot of water, a cup of cornmeal, a pinch of salt. Stir it until it thickened. Pour it into a bowl with warm milk over the top and a thread of sorghum if you had it. That was supper. In farm communities across southern Indiana and the hill country of southern Ohio, cornmeal mush appeared on the table 3 or 4 nights a week in lean seasons. A pound of yellow cornmeal cost 8 cents in 1963. A family of 5 could eat for under a dime. What most people do not know is that leftover mush was sliced cold the next morning, fried crispy in the same skillet it was cooked in, and eaten with syrup for breakfast. Nothing was wasted. The pot was rinsed, not scrubbed. The cornmeal cooked right down to the bottom would flavor the next batch. That was the whole recipe, and it stretched across 2 meals. The argument over where it started has been going since before the Civil War and has never been settled. Brunswick County, Virginia claims it. Brunswick, Georgia claims it too. What both versions agree on: an iron pot, a fire outdoors, and a community gathered around the cooking. Original Brunswick stew, documented before the Civil War, used squirrel and rabbit cooked down with fresh corn, butter beans, and tomatoes over a fire that burned most of the day. By the 20th century, squirrel had given way to chicken and pork. The beans came from a can, the tomatoes too. But the dish's logic remained. You made it outdoors. For more people than you could count, the recipe guarded by whoever had tended the pot longest. Church socials across Virginia and Georgia still ladled Brunswick stew from 50-gallon iron kettles into the 1970s. In the slow cooker today, scaled for one person eating alone, it carries the same memory forward. Shredded pork, shredded chicken, corn, butter beans, tomatoes, and Worcestershire, cooked until everything blurs into one smoky, communal thing. Number 24. Cornish pasty wrapped in newspaper. A folded half-moon of pastry stuffed with diced beef, potato, onion, and a single turnip. Cornish miners brought the recipe across the ocean to the anthracite seams of Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania, and the Iron Range of Calumet, Michigan. A miner's wife crimped the edge into a thick rope so her husband could grip it with coal-black fingers and eat without putting it down. She cut his initials into the corner so he could find his pail in the crib room when 40 men ate at once. One end of the pasty held meat and root vegetable, but the other end held stewed apple, sealed off so the savory side did not bleed into the sweet. The crust along the top edge she left thick like a handle, and that thick crust was for the knockers, the spirits the miners believed lived in the dark seams of the mountain. You left your crust on the rib of the gangway and walked away before the next blast. Number 24 did not need a fork, a plate, or a clean hand, and that was the entire point. Bean and potato burritos were an economical and filling meal that made use of inexpensive, accessible ingredients. Simple tortillas were filled with a mixture of cooked beans and diced or mashed potatoes, sometimes seasoned with onions, garlic, or chili powder to add flavor. This dish was popular among families looking to stretch limited food supplies while providing enough calories and nutrients to satisfy hunger. Beans offered a valuable source of protein and fiber, while potatoes added bulk and energy, making the burrito a complete meal at a low cost. Easy to prepare and portable, bean and potato burritos were perfect for lunches or quick dinners. They also reflected the cultural blending occurring in many American kitchens during the mid-20th century. This humble dish demonstrated how creativity and thrift combined to feed families through tough economic times. Prune cake brought dense, moist sweetness to Christmas tables when other fruits were too expensive. Dried prunes were affordable, shelf-stable, and available year-round at general stores, making them reliable for families who could not afford fresh fruit or canned goods. The batter was enriched with stewed prunes chopped and folded throughout, along with spices like cinnamon, allspice, and nutmeg that transformed simple ingredients into something festive. Baked in cast-iron pans, the cake emerged dark, fragrant, and moist in ways other Depression-era cakes rarely achieved. The prunes kept it from drying out, allowing it to be made ahead for Christmas Day. Some families added powdered sugar dustings while others served slices plain, letting fruit and spices speak for themselves. Prune cake was practical rather than glamorous, but it delivered real satisfaction to families who had learned that survival and celebration could coexist, each slice proving modest ingredients could still create holiday memories. Hot grits with bacon drippings were the winter breakfast that kept families warm long before the sun climbed up over the rooftops. Grits were cheap, filling, and dependable, which made them perfect for cold seasons when the body needed something hearty to face the day. Grandma saved every spoonful of drippings from the skillet, pouring them into a jar she kept near the stove like it was treasure. When the water boiled and the grits began to thicken, she added a little scoop of those drippings, stirring slowly until the pot turned creamy and rich. The smell alone was enough to pull children from warm beds. This breakfast did not need anything fancy. The flavor came from the memory of yesterday's meal and the promise of today's strength. It tasted like warmth you could hold in your hands, the kind that spread through your chest and made winter mornings feel possible. This was not restaurant food. This was real food made by people who understood how to stretch flavor across days. Hot grits with bacon drippings tasted like comfort, resourcefulness, and the quiet determination to start the day with something good. Rolled oat meatloaf was another way people made do when meat was a rare luxury during the Depression era. The idea was simple. Oats were cheap, filling, and easy to find, so they became the backbone of many loaves when ground beef was scarce. Housewives would combine rolled oats with onion, a little broth or tomato juice, and perhaps an egg if one could be spared, then bake it until firm. The oats took on the flavor of the few seasonings and drippings that were used, giving the illusion of meat even if very little was present. If there was any beef or pork to add, it stretched further thanks to the bulk of the oats. Served with gravy made from pan drippings or even a thin tomato sauce, it could feel hearty enough to pass for the real thing. Many families came to appreciate the flavor and comfort it provided, even without meat. Peanut butter bread pudding was the dessert you made when every sweet thing in the house was gone, but no one wanted to end dinner on an empty note. You'd tear up old bread, pour over a mix of milk, sugar, and a few spoonfuls of peanut butter, then bake until the top turned golden and sticky. The smell filled the house like a warm blanket. It was thick, sweet, and rich enough to make you forget how cheap it was. No one wasted bread back then. It was too precious. If you had bananas or raisins, you could toss those in, but most times it was just bread, milk, and peanut butter working overtime. Families made it in square pans or cast-iron skillets, serving it hot with a drizzle of syrup if they were lucky. It wasn't a fancy dessert, but it was one that made you close your eyes with that first bite. Peanut butter bread pudding was poor folks' decadence, a taste of comfort that didn't cost a dime extra.
Since the swinging 60s, Hostess fruit pies have been pocket-sized parcels of joy, bursting with fruity goodness. Their handheld design made them a convenient option for on-the-go snacking without sacrificing flavor. These pies became the quintessential treat for those on the move, marrying convenience with the classic flavors of home-baked desserts. The addition of comic book advertisements further cemented their place in popular culture, making them a nostalgic treat for many. Despite changes in the snack food landscape, Hostess fruit pies remain popular, continuing to offer a sweet slice of nostalgia.
21. Peanut butter crackers. This was the snack that lived in every kitchen drawer, every glove compartment, every bedside table in America for decades. 2 saltine crackers with peanut butter spread between them. A jar of peanut butter cost 59 cents in 1971. A box of crackers cost less than a quarter. Together, they provided protein, fat, and enough substance to hold a person through the gap between lunch and dinner. Doris Novak, the widow in Scranton with the cracker tin, made these every afternoon at 3 o'clock. She kept the peanut butter in the cabinet directly above the tin so she never had to reach or bend or search. Everything was within arm's length. That mattered when your knees hurt and your balance was not what it used to be. She made 4 crackers, 2 sandwiches, and ate them with a glass of water at the kitchen table. Her daughter found the routine unchanged 9 years later. Same tin, same jar, same chair. The simplest snack in America, and it kept a woman anchored to her kitchen when the rest of her life had come undone. Peanuts in an RC Cola was the one ritual every mountain kid performed without being taught. Tilt the bottle slightly, pour the salted peanuts past the neck, feel them hit the cola and fizz up in a sweet salt cloud, then drink. The peanuts sank, then floated. Then you got both at once, cold carbonation and soft beer nut richness that no store ever packaged together because nobody needed to. RC. Cola had deep roots in Appalachia. Royal Crowns spread through the mining towns and hollows long before convenience stores arrived. The miner's cola, the working man's 79-cent choice. The peanuts were Lance or Tom's, picked up at the register. Nobody told you the ratio. You watched someone do it once, your father, your uncle, some older boy at the filling station, and you knew. Your grandmother did it the same way her mother did. When she stopped being there to do it, nobody reached for those peanuts the same way anymore. The cold cream cheese on date nut bread was a snack that belonged to grandmother's kitchens and church bazaars, the kind of place where the bread came wrapped in wax paper and sat on the counter all week. Date nut bread, dense and dark with the sweetness of medjool dates and the crunch of pressed walnuts, was sold in small cylindrical loaves through the 1960s and 70s. You spread Philadelphia cream cheese on those rounds the way you'd spread it on a bagel, only thicker. Philadelphia cream cheese had been produced since 1872, originally made in Chester, New York by dairyman William Lawrence, and by the 1980s it was the default American spread for anything needing richness without effort. The cream cheese against the sweet, heavy date crumb created something far more considered than it was. By the 1980s, date nut bread had started its long disappearance from bakery shelves, pushed out by muffins and convenience loaves. The grandmother who kept it stopped buying it when it became hard to find, and then she was gone too. Number 18. Pawpaw fruit. Every September in the shaded creek bottoms across Appalachia, the pawpaw trees dropped their fruit. Children knew exactly where the trees were. They guarded those locations the way other children guarded a fishing hole. The fruit was roughly the size of a mango, with a thin green skin that bruised easily. Inside, the flesh was yellow and custard soft, with a flavor somewhere between banana and mango. You ate it raw, standing under the tree, spitting out the large brown seeds. There was no way to store a pawpaw. It ripened for about a week and then it was gone. That narrow window made it precious. In Mingo County, West Virginia, families planned their September around pawpaw season. Grandmothers made pawpaw bread. Children ate them until their stomachs ached. And then the season ended. The pawpaw was never cultivated commercially because it could not survive shipping. Too soft, too fragile, too brief. The only people who ever tasted it were the people who lived near the trees. In the hollows along the Tug Fork River, a man named Dewey Blankenship kept a pawpaw grove on his property that his grandfather had tended before him. Every September, neighbors walked to his land with paper sacks, and he let them pick without charge. He never sold a single fruit. He said it was not his to sell. The trees were there before his family arrived, and they would be there after he was gone. Your children will probably never taste a pawpaw. That is not because the trees disappeared. It is because nobody walks to them anymore. Number 12. Sorghum syrup on bread. Plain white bread or a torn piece of cornbread, a pour of golden sorghum syrup, folded and eaten over the sink because it would drip. In the mountain counties of eastern Kentucky, sorghum was not simply a condiment. It was a form of economy and tradition, passed down across generations without anyone writing it down. Kentucky led the nation in sorghum production well into the 1960s. A quart jar of good sorghum cost 15 cents or less if traded with a neighbor. The syrup was lighter and less bitter than blackstrap molasses, with a warm, grassy sweetness that tasted like late summer. Spread thin on bread, it stretched through a long afternoon for almost no cost. If you grew up eating this, you remember its exact color, amber at the edges, darker toward the center of the jar, and the specific weight of the pour. Decades later, maybe you still keep a jar on the shelf, not because they need it, but because it means something to have it there. Number 25. Beans and weenies. Few suppers hit the table with as much honest pride as a skillet of beans and weenies. The dish started as a Depression kitchen workhorse, a can of pork and beans cracked open and stretched with a sliced frankfurter that cost pennies at the corner butcher. Working mothers in mill towns kept the can on the shelf for the nights when payday was 3 days off. They sliced the hot dog into thin coins, browned the coins until the edges curled, then poured the beans over the top and let the pan simmer until the sauce thickened. A spoon of mustard went in for tang. The pot fed 4 for under a quarter through most of the 1930s, and by 1955 it had quietly become the standard Boy Scout campfire supper. Seniors who lived through that era still keep a can in the pantry. 12 minutes from stove to bowl, no chopping, no fuss. Number 25. Water gravy on toast. When there was not any milk, butter, or meat left in the house, there was still flour, water, and the drippings stuck to the bottom of a skillet. Your mother scraped those drippings loose, added a spoonful of flour, stirred until it browned, then poured in enough water to pull it all into a thin, dark gravy. She poured it over toast and set it on the table. In the hollows of West Virginia and the mill towns along the Catawba River in North Carolina, water gravy was the meal that appeared when nothing else was left. It didn't have a name in most households. Back then, families called it gravy and bread because naming it would have made it real. Would have meant saying out loud that the week had run dry. A little bacon drippings made it taste richer than it had any right to. 1 skillet, 5 minutes. No pots to wash. That was enough to put something warm in your stomach before bed. Simple food works that way. Through the 1950s and 60s, pork neck bones were a butcher's discard, priced at pennies per pound because commercial processors had no use for them. African American and Appalachian cooks had understood something those processors overlooked. Neck bones are loaded with collagen, simmered in a slow cooker for 8 hours with water, garlic, onion, and root vegetables. That collagen dissolved into the cooking liquid, turning thin water into something thick, glossy, and deeply savory. A gravy built from bones that cost almost nothing. The meat, threaded around the bones, became fall-apart tender and absorbed every bit of flavor from the surrounding broth. You ate it over rice, and the rice soaked up the neck bone gravy, and the combination stopped conversations. What the butcher gave away as worthless, the cook turned into something people drove across town for. Those who knew what to do with neck bones carried a knowledge most of the world had not yet caught up to. Number 15. Dripping sandwich on rye. The brown jelly that gathered in the bottom of the roast pan went into a clay crock by the stove. A foundry worker at the Goodyear plant in Akron in 1939 spread cold beef dripping on a thick slice of caraway rye, salted it heavy, and ate it before the second whistle. The dark layer of meat juice that settled at the bottom of the crock was called the jelly, and that was the part the man of the house got first because his arm was holding the family up. The white fat on top went into pie crust and biscuit dough. A single crock from a Sunday roast lasted a family of 7 through October. Number 15 had no recipe. Your grandmother did not write it down because there was nothing to measure. You learned the sandwich the same way you learned to walk. Macaroni and cheese casserole with breadcrumbs was a beloved baked dish that brought comfort and texture to many tables during hard economic times. This casserole combined tender macaroni noodles with a creamy cheese sauce made from affordable cheddar or processed cheese, creating a rich and satisfying base. The topping of toasted breadcrumbs added a crunchy contrast, elevating the simple ingredients into a dish that felt special despite its humble components. Easy to prepare in large batches, it was a practical way for families to stretch limited meat portions by relying on pasta and cheese for sustenance. Macaroni and cheese casserole also offered versatility, allowing cooks to add whatever extras they had on hand, such as diced vegetables or leftover meats. The warm, cheesy flavor was familiar and comforting, making it a favorite among children and adults alike. This casserole symbolized the creativity and resilience of families who found joy in simple, affordable meals during the 1960s to 1980s. It remains a nostalgic reminder of home-cooked dinners where every bite was savored and shared. Water pie was the desperate dessert that turned almost nothing into something sweet enough for Christmas dinner. When families could not afford eggs, milk, butter, or fruit, this pie emerged from sheer necessity and stubborn determination to have dessert on the holiday table. The filling was astonishingly simple: water, sugar, flour, vanilla, and small amount of butter mixed together and poured into a pie crust. During baking, the mixture transformed into custard-like filling that was surprisingly satisfying. The pie had other names in different regions: depression pie, desperation pie, names carrying the weight of era's hardship. Children eating this pie often never knew how little it contained, only that mother had made them Christmas dessert. The crust could be made from lard and flour, ingredients even the poorest pantries usually held. Water pie represented the absolute bottom of depression experience, yet also represented triumph, love and determination, creating celebration from virtually nothing at all. Tomato custard casserole turned two everyday items, canned tomatoes and eggs, into a richly flavored dinner that captured the resourcefulness of the 1960s. The eggs were whisked with milk and a pinch of sugar before being poured over chopped tomatoes and breadcrumbs, then baked until the custard set and the top turned slightly caramelized. This casserole provided protein, vitamins, and comfort all in one dish without requiring expensive meats or elaborate preparation. Many families served it with buttered toast or a simple green salad, letting the natural acidity of the tomatoes balance the creamy custard. The recipe became a reliable weeknight option because it used inexpensive pantry staples that were always on hand. Its smooth texture and gentle sweetness made it appealing to children, while adults appreciated the subtle complexity that developed as the tomatoes baked. This unassuming casserole is a testament to how mid-century cooks could transform basic ingredients into something hearty, nourishing, and surprisingly elegant with little more than patience and a hot oven. Carrot marmalade was a sweet spread that helped families feel like they had something luxurious for breakfast, even in the toughest years of the Depression. Sugar was precious, but when it could be managed, grated carrots simmered down with citrus peel made a bright orange jam that tasted far richer than its ingredients suggested. Citrus itself was not always available, so many recipes leaned heavily on the carrots, using peel or extract when possible. The finished marmalade was thick, fragrant, and easily spread across homemade bread or crackers, turning simple staples into something that felt festive. Children loved its sweetness, and parents appreciated how it stretched a handful of carrots into enough jam to last for several mornings. Many community cookbooks published carrot marmalade recipes, encouraging families to rely on what they could grow in gardens. It was a dish that turned scarcity into creativity, and for many households it became a small comfort that brightened otherwise plain and repetitive meals. Canned milk corn chowder was a soup that hugged you from the inside. You'd open a can of evaporated milk, pour it into a pot, add a few handfuls of frozen corn and some instant potato flakes, and let it all come together over a low flame. The result was thick, creamy, and comforting, the kind of meal that tasted richer than your wallet said it should. It warmed you up fast and made you feel like you had something special on the stove. This was a dinner for cold nights, small paychecks, and big appetites. Even without bacon or cream, it had depth, thanks to the sweet corn and that canned milk tang. Served with a few crackers or a slice of bread, it made a full meal out of almost nothing. Canned milk corn chowder wasn't just food. It was a reminder that with a pot, a can, and a little patience, you could turn scarcity into comfort.
Bubba Bubba swaggered onto the bubblegum stage in '79, ready to revolutionize the bubble-blowing biz with its non-stick formula and audacious flavors. Its unique formula made it easier for kids to clean up after blowing giant bubbles, enhancing its appeal. Its introduction of bold flavors and engaging commercials featuring bubble-blowing contests quickly made it a favorite among kids and teens. The brand's focus on fun and innovation has helped it maintain a special place in the hearts of those who remember the joy and playfulness of competing to blow the biggest bubble, making Hubba Bubba a symbol of the carefree days of youth.
Number 24, cinnamon toast. A slice of bread, a pat of butter, a shake of cinnamon, a sprinkle of sugar. Under the broiler for 2 minutes until the sugar bubbled and the edges turned golden brown. That was it. Mothers made this for children after school in every decade from the 1920s through the 1980s. But the people who kept making it longest were the ones who lived alone. A retired postal worker in Indianapolis made cinnamon toast every evening at 6:30 for 11 years after his wife passed. He used the same butter dish she had picked out at a department store in 1962. The toast took 2 minutes. The ritual took a lifetime. A loaf of bread cost 36 cents in 1975. Sugar was a pantry staple that never ran out. For a senior with arthritis, this was one of the few snacks that could be made entirely with one hand. You did not even need a knife if you used soft butter. Warm, sweet, and familiar. Like something you remembered before you could remember anything at all. Peanut butter and Caro syrup fudge was made in a bowl without a stove, a thermometer, or much patience. Spoon peanut butter into a bowl, pour Caro corn syrup over it, stir until it stiffened into a dense, sticky mass that held its shape when you pinched off a piece. That was the candy. Hard in the refrigerator, soft in a warm kitchen, eaten off the fingers or rolled into balls and dusted with powdered sugar. Mountain women called it poor man's fudge, which was accurate. Real chocolate fudge required a candy thermometer and cream, neither guaranteed. Caro and peanut butter were always in the cabinet. Corn syrup had been a staple in Appalachian kitchens since the early 20th century when cane sugar was too expensive and peanuts from the Piedmont lowlands made peanut butter an affordable staple. 2 cheap ingredients, 1 snack better than anything fancy. The women who made it never measured. You could not get it right if you measured. Velveeta nachos were what happened when someone's older sister decided the whole afternoon needed to be an occasion. Velveeta had been in American kitchens since 1928, engineered by the Monroe Cheese Company to melt smoothly without breaking, a quality that real cheddar could never reliably deliver. By the early 1980s, as Tex-Mex flavor spread into the mainstream, Velveeta found its true calling. You laid tortilla chips across a plate, hacked the block into rough slabs over them, and slid the whole thing into the oven or the microwave. The microwave version came out with orange pooling and a slight skin on top that meant it was done. Real cheese splits, browns, and goes stringy. Velveeta stayed perfect and patient. You can still buy the block, but nobody makes it this way anymore. Chips spread across the plate, the block cut by hand, everyone crowded around before it cooled. Number 22, cracklin bread. Every fall, when the temperature dropped below freezing and the hog killing started, the women saved the cracklings. Cracklings were the crispy, golden pieces of pork skin and fat left over after the lard was rendered. You could eat them straight, and people did. The real prize, though, was cracklin bread. Cornmeal, buttermilk, a pinch of salt, and a handful of those cracklings baked in a cast-iron skillet greased with lard. The bread came out dense and golden, with pockets of crispy pork through every bite. Children ate it after school. Men carried a wrapped piece in their coat pocket to the field. It did not need butter. The cracklings had already given it all the salt and fat a person could want. In the mountains of West Virginia, families waited all year for hog killing day, and the cracklin bread was the first reward. Number 25. Water gravy on crackers. When there was nothing left to spread and nothing to dip, there was still the skillet. Your grandmother scraped the drippings from the bottom of the cast iron pan, bacon grease, lard, the brown bits from whatever had fried there last, and built a thin gravy from flour, water, and those drippings. She poured it hot over saltines or soda crackers. In the coal camps of McDowell County, West Virginia, this appeared at the end of the week when the company's store credit ran out. Families called it gravy crackers or just something warm. The crackers went soft under the gravy and soaked up every bit of that pan flavor. If you were that child, hungry since noon, soft, salty, warm crackers were more than enough. The whole thing came together in under 5 minutes from ingredients that cost almost nothing. Number 22. Hot water cornbread. Long before baking powder reached the back roads, hot water cornbread was already feeding the South. The recipe is 2 ingredients: yellow cornmeal, boiling water, a pinch of salt if the cook had it. The trick was the pour. Hot water went into the cornmeal in a slow stream while one hand stirred and the other held the kettle steady. The dough came together in seconds. Each patty got shaped by hand, slid into a skillet bubbling with lard, and fried until the crust turned the color of pulled toffee. By the Depression, it had become the daily bread of African American kitchens across Mississippi and Alabama, partly because cornmeal cost less than wheat flour, and partly because lard came free with every hog. Seniors who keep a tin of cornmeal in the cabinet can have supper on the table in 11 minutes flat. Number 20. Egg drop soup. Depression style. Not the Chinese restaurant version with cornstarch and sesame oil. This was something different entirely. A woman in rural Alabama or the Ozark communities of Missouri browned sliced potatoes and onions in a little lard, added water to fill the pot, seasoned with salt and a bay leaf, and when the broth was rolling, she cracked 2 eggs directly into the pot and stirred fast. The eggs broke into long golden ribbons through the hot broth. It was protein without the cost of meat. Eggs averaged 53 cents a dozen in 1965. For a family of 4, 2 eggs in a pot of broth and potatoes was a full supper for under 20 cents. Nobody called it egg drop soup. It's a simple and beautiful piece of ingenuity. They called it potato broth, or just the egg soup. The name was not important. Getting everyone fed before dark was. Nobody outside the family knew what to call it. You said slumgullion because your grandmother said it, and she said it because her mother did. And somewhere in the 1840s, an Irishman coined the word, from slum meaning slime and gullion meaning cesspool, because the stew looked like a wreck and tasted like a revelation. Merriam-Webster recorded the term in 1890 as a meat stew. By the Depression, it had become ground beef, elbow macaroni, and tomato sauce cooked down until the pasta absorbed everything. Your neighbor called it American goulash. The firehouse called it chop suey. In Columbus, Ohio, it was Johnny Marzetti, named after a restaurant owner who popularized the dish in the 1920s. None of those were exactly the same recipe. All of them were the same meal. You browned a pound of beef, added tomatoes and broth, dropped in the dry elbows, turned the slow cooker to low. 8 hours later, the macaroni had absorbed every bit of fat and sweetness, and a cheap pound of beef had stretched to feed 6. Number 16. Sausage and pepper sandwich. An Italian-American shipfitter at the Bethlehem Yards in Sparrows Point, Maryland in 1944 packed cold sausage and fried bell pepper between 2 halves of a long, crusty roll his wife baked Sunday morning. The sausage came from a butcher on Eastern Avenue in Highlandtown who ground it himself with fennel seed and a splash of red wine. The peppers fried slow in the same black pan with the rendered sausage fat and a clove of garlic, and the whole sandwich went into the pail with a square of cheesecloth around it. By the 11 o'clock whistle, the bread had soaked up the orange grease and turned the color of brick. You ate it standing up over the rivet bin. The smell carried across the yard, and other men nodded the way men nod when they recognize a Sunday in a Tuesday lunch. Oatmeal with brown sugar was a hearty and affordable breakfast choice that kept families nourished and ready for the day. Simple rolled or quick oats were cooked in water or milk, then sweetened with brown sugar or molasses for extra flavor and calories. This warming dish provided fiber, energy, and comfort, making it a staple in homes facing financial hardship. Oatmeal was easy to prepare in large quantities and could be varied with additions like raisins or cinnamon when available. Its affordability and nutritional value made it a go-to breakfast across diverse American households during the 1960s to 1980s. For many, oatmeal with brown sugar is a nostalgic taste of early mornings when families gathered before work and school. The simplicity and warmth of this meal embody the practical and loving care present in homes stretching every resource. Mock apple pie was the miracle dessert that fooled everyone at the Christmas table, made entirely without a single apple in sight. When fresh fruit became a luxury most families could not afford, clever cooks discovered that Ritz crackers soaked in a syrup of water, sugar, cream of tartar, and lemon juice transformed into something tasting remarkably like real apple pie. The crackers absorbed the spiced liquid, swelling and softening until they achieved the exact texture of cooked apples. Families baked these pies in cast-iron skillets, serving them warm with whatever cream the household could spare. Children often had no idea they were eating crackers instead of fruit, their faces lighting up at the familiar Christmas flavors of cinnamon and nutmeg. The recipe spread through church bulletins and word of mouth between neighbors sharing survival strategies. Mock apple pie represented Depression ingenuity, proving that holiday traditions could survive even when orchards were bare and grocery money had vanished. Evaporated and powdered milk were the quiet heroes of the poor man's pantry, the kind that didn't look like much but made all the difference. When fresh milk was too expensive or too far to fetch, these tins stepped in. Powdered milk mixed with water could be used for baking, breakfast, and even feeding babies when nothing else was around. Evaporated milk had that thick, sweet flavor that made coffee richer and pies creamier. It was comfort in a can. People learned to trust it because it never spoiled and could sit on a shelf for months. During lean winters, that security meant everything. You'd see families mix a little milk powder with oats, stretch it into gravy, or stir it into mashed potatoes. It might not have been the farm fresh kind, but it carried the same warmth. For many, those tins meant nourishment and dignity in a time when both were scarce. Stewed apples with bread cubes was a dessert that stretched every bit of fruit to its fullest during the Depression. A few apples, sometimes bruised or close to spoiling, were peeled and stewed with sugar or molasses if available. To make the dish go further, stale bread cubes were added to soak up the syrupy juices. The result was a warm, comforting pudding-like dish that could serve several people with only a handful of apples. Spices like cinnamon or nutmeg might be added when they could be spared, but even without them, the dish was sweet and filling. For many children, this was the closest thing to pie they would taste during those years. It turned waste into dessert and brought comfort at the end of long days. Even though it cost next to nothing, it felt like a treat worth remembering. Stewed apples with bread cubes showed how creativity kept hope alive. Ketchup and egg scramble was born in kitchens where groceries ran out faster than the week. You would crack 2 eggs into a pan, squeeze a generous squiggle of ketchup, and mix until everything turned pink and sizzly. The ketchup added color, tang, and a sweetness that made even the thinnest batch of eggs taste like more than it was. It stretched the meal, gave it life, and added a hint of something bright in a time when flavor usually meant salt. Parents swore by it, especially when breakfast needed to feed more mouths than there were eggs to go around. Kids loved it because it looked fun, like someone had drawn with crayons on their breakfast plate. The smell of sizzling ketchup filled tiny kitchens across the country, turning cheap mornings into something memorable. It was quick, warm, and didn't leave you hungry. For many families, it wasn't just food, it was a little lesson in making do, in turning scarcity into something that still made you smile before heading out into the day.
With a name as loud as its packaging, Screaming Yellow Zonkers burst onto the snack scene in 1968. The unique combination of sweet and buttery flavors set it apart from traditional savory popcorn snacks. Packaged in an eye-catching black box, it offered a sweet and buttery twist to popcorn that quickly won over popcorn enthusiasts. The boxes, adorned with playful and irreverent humor, became collectible items in their own right. Despite its departure from the market, the legend of Screaming Yellow Zonkers lives on, a testament to a time when snacks could dare to be different and laughter was as important as taste.
Done. Number 20. Cottage cheese and canned peaches. In the 1950s and 1960s, this was considered a proper lunch. A scoop of cottage cheese on a plate, half a can of peach slices arranged around it, sometimes on a leaf of iceberg lettuce. Women's magazines called it a salad. Diners put it on the menu as a light plate. But for seniors living alone in the decades that followed, it became something different. It became the meal you made when you could not face the stove. Open a can, scoop from a container, sit down, eat. A can of store-brand peaches cost 49 cents in 1980. Cottage cheese was 89 cents for a pint. Together, they lasted 2 or 3 servings. No cooking, no cleanup beyond a spoon and a plate. The sweetness of the peaches against the mild tang of the cottage cheese was a combination that tasted like a cafeteria in 1958. For a senior who remembered exactly that, the flavor was not just food, it was a time machine. Moon pie and an RC Cola carried a price and a history. The marshmallow-filled graham cracker sandwich coated in chocolate or banana, paired with Royal Crown, cost under a dime apiece at the company store. The moon pie was created in 1917 at the Chattanooga Bakery in Tennessee when a traveling salesman visited a coal camp and asked what miners wanted. Something big, filling, cheap enough to eat on a break. They held their hands in a circle and described it the size of the moon. By the 1970s, every mountain child knew the ritual. 1 bite of moon pie, then a long pull of cold RC. The carbonation cut through the marshmallow in a way no other drink could match. Pepsi was wrong. Coke was wrong. RC was the one. Old men at the filling station did this the same way on a Tuesday in 1972 they had in 1952. When the company store closed and the stool went with it, the man who always sat there went too. The moon pie is still on the rack. The rest of it is gone. Ants on a log sounds like something a camp counselor invented on a dare, but from the 1950s onward, it was the snack that taught American kids that cooking could mean assembly, not heat. You split a celery stalk, dragged a butter knife heavy with peanut butter through the groove until full, and lined the raisins up one by one, never dumping them, always placing, because the spacing was the whole point. The Oxford Companion to American Food and Drink traces the name to a Minneapolis Star-Tribune article from February of 1959, where a family described it as something children had started making themselves. The Girl Scouts had a version in their cookbooks as far back as 1946, though they just called it celery sticks. What the name added was theater. By the 1980s, it had moved from summer camp to every kitchen in America, every kid making it the same way. Deliberate raisin placement, as if rules existed. They did. Nobody wrote them down. Number 25. Pickled eggs. Cecil Fugate was not the only man in eastern Kentucky selling them. Every country store, every gas station from Harlan to Hazard had a jar on the counter. Hard-boiled eggs, peeled and dropped into a brine of vinegar, salt, sugar, and pickling spices. They sat in that liquid for weeks. The whites turned translucent. The yolks went dense and creamy. A man could buy one for a nickel, eat it in 3 bites, and keep working for another 4 hours without his stomach growling. Just a jar, a pair of tongs, and a piece of wax paper if the store owner felt generous. In the coal camps of Harlan County, miners bought them by the half dozen before heading underground. The vinegar kept them from spoiling in the heat of the tunnels. Your grandfather probably ate 100 of them and never once called it a snack. He called it getting by. Number 14. Molasses on biscuits. A biscuit split in half, a pour of sorghum molasses into the open face of the bread, folded and eaten over the sink because it dripped. In the southern mountains, sorghum was sometimes called the poor people's sweetener, and that was accurate. A family in Harlan County, Kentucky could produce their own sorghum from a small plot of cane, and a quart jar of thick, dark syrup was worth more than most store-bought sweets. The molasses soaked into the soft biscuit quickly and had to be eaten fast before it ran. If you grew up in those mountains, you ate these before school and again when you came home in the afternoon. The biscuit cost almost nothing if a family used their own flour and lard. The sorghum was often bartered, grown locally, or carried from the general store for about 15 cents a quart in 1963. That was your whole season of cold afternoons. Number 21. Navy bean soup. Senate dining rooms have served navy bean soup every day since 1903, and the recipe has barely moved in over a century. A pound of dried navy beans soaked overnight, a ham hock from the smokehouse, an onion chopped fine, water enough to cover by 3 fingers. The pot sat on the back burner for 3 hours while the beans gave up their starch and the ham gave up its salt. Out in the Depression-era heartland, the same pot was the Friday supper that carried families through to Sunday. The beans cost 9 cents a pound. The hock came free with the side of pork. Seniors today get 4 meals out of a single batch, with enough left to freeze a quart for the week the gas bill comes due. Number 17. Hoover Stew. Named bitterly after President Herbert Hoover, who left office in 1933 with bread lines stretching around city blocks, Hoover Stew lived on in American kitchens for 30 more years after the Depression officially ended. Macaroni noodles, sliced hot dogs, a can of stewed tomatoes, and a can of corn. All in one pot. Boil the macaroni, add the rest, let it simmer until the tomatoes had soaked into the pasta. In shantytown communities called Hoovervilles during the 1930s, this exact formula fed hundreds out of community pots. By the 1960s, it had moved, generation by generation, into the kitchens of working-class families in Cleveland and Detroit and Gary, Indiana, where it was just called mac and hot dogs. A package of macaroni was 19 cents in 1965. A can of tomatoes was 15 cents. 4 hot dogs stretched to feed 5 people. That was dinner for under 50 cents. The name Hoover had long since been forgotten. The meal hadn't. The real test was in the color. She cubed the russet potatoes, not too small or they'd turn to mush, and when the cast iron skillet heated up with a spoonful of bacon grease, she waited. Not for a timer, for a sound. A specific low sizzle that meant the oil was ready and not a second before. You learned it by standing next to her, watching. Clara Canucciari, born in 1915 and raised in Depression-era New York, documented this dish in her viral Great Depression cooking series, calling it the poor man's meal. Cubed potatoes, sliced onion, hot dog coins browned together in one pan for under 15 cents a serving. You watched the hot dog coins split at the edges, heard the small pop when the casing hit the grease. You can make this in a slow cooker now, 6 hours on low, everything softened and unified in the fat. You can find the video online. But the woman who made it for you is not in any video, and the specific sound of her cast iron is not a sound you will hear again. Number 19. Hard-boiled egg and a pinch of salt. 2 eggs boiled hard in the same pot the family used for everything else, peeled at the kitchen table at 5 in the morning, then wrapped in a square of brown grocer's paper with a corner of salt twisted in like a pharmacy packet. A railroad shop hand at the Norfolk and Western Works in Roanoke in 1947 carried 2 of these in his pail every day for 26 years. You cracked the shell on the rim of the workbench and the salt spilled into the broken pieces of white. Some days, the yolk was still soft because the woman of the house had been called to a sick child the night before. But the egg was free if your family kept hens behind the rented duplex. It became the protein backbone of a Depression-era pail when meat was a Sunday item, and it stayed in the pail through the war and the post-war decade because the math had not changed. Tomato soup with grilled cheese croutons was a simple yet satisfying meal that offered both warmth and substance for families on a budget. The basic tomato soup was typically made from canned tomatoes, broth, and seasonings, simmered to create a smooth, flavorful base. To add texture and a filling element, small grilled cheese sandwiches were cut into bite-sized croutons and floated atop the soup. This clever pairing stretched limited ingredients into a wholesome dish that children and adults could enjoy alike. The crispy, buttery bread combined with melted cheese complemented the tangy soup, providing contrasting flavors and textures in each bite. Tomato soup with grilled cheese croutons was easy to prepare in large pots, perfect for feeding families during cold months. Its affordability and comforting taste made it a beloved staple in many homes during the 1960s through the 1980s. The dish remains a nostalgic reminder of simple meals that nourished both body and soul. Potato soup became the warm embrace that greeted many families on Christmas morning when nothing else filled the pantry. Potatoes cost only pennies per pound even in the hardest years and could be stored in root cellars for months without spoiling. Mothers would dice whatever potatoes remained from fall harvest, simmering them slowly with onions in water or milk until the mixture thickened naturally into creamy, filling soup. The aroma of simmering onions and tender potatoes filled small kitchens, creating warmth that went beyond temperature. Some families added bacon grease for richness, while others stretched the soup by crumbling day-old bread into each bowl. Children gathered around tables covered with oilcloth, hands wrapped around warm bowls that chased away December chill. Potato soup required no expensive ingredients, no special equipment, just patience and willingness to turn humble vegetables into something that tasted like love. It was Christmas dinner for those who had nothing else to serve. Corncob jelly was one of the most surprising Depression-era creations, turning what was usually discarded into something sweet and useful. After eating or cutting kernels from corn, families would boil the stripped cobs for a long time until the liquid turned golden. With sugar and sometimes pectin, this liquid became a jelly that spread easily on bread or biscuits. It had a mild corn flavor, slightly sweet, and it gave people a way to stretch ingredients without buying fruit for jams. Since sugar was often rationed or expensive, this jelly was seen as a clever way to create a sweet treat out of nothing more than scraps. Many families remembered it fondly, not only because it was thrifty, but because it represented resourcefulness at its finest. Children often spread it on cornbread or stale bread softened in milk, turning waste into dessert. It may seem odd today, but back then it was pure ingenuity. Peanut soup was a filling option that came straight out of the need for protein when meat was too expensive or unavailable. Ground peanuts simmered with water or milk created a creamy, nutty broth that was surprisingly hearty. Onions, celery, or a bit of leftover potato might be added to give it body, but the peanuts did most of the heavy lifting. The flavor was rich enough that it almost felt indulgent, even though it cost very little to prepare. Served with cornbread or biscuits if available, it could stretch into a complete meal for an entire family. Many households in the South relied on peanuts as a cheap crop, and this soup was a natural way to put them to use. For many children who grew up during the Depression, peanut soup became a nostalgic memory of warmth and survival, showing how simple ingredients could stand in for things they could not afford. Mayonnaise and tomato saltines were what passed for luxury when the lights were dim and the pantry looked bare. You'd take a sleeve of saltines, smear each one with a bit of mayonnaise, then press on a slice of tomato fresh from a neighbor's garden or the grocery discount bin, sprinkle a little salt, maybe pepper if you had it, and you were set. Folks called them poor man's canapés, but they tasted like victory after a long day. It was the kind of snack you made barefoot at the kitchen counter with a glass of sweet tea sweating beside you. Kids thought it looked strange, but always came back for another bite because it hit that perfect balance between creamy, salty, and sharp. You could find families across the South and Midwest doing the same thing late at night, catching reruns on television with a paper towel full of saltines in hand. There was no need for fine dining or silver spoons, just a little mayonnaise, a ripe tomato, and something cold to drink. It wasn't just a snack. It was a reminder that the simplest things could feel fancy when you needed them to.
Beechnut fruit stripe gum dazzled the 1960s with its rainbow of flavors and whimsical tattoos, making each stick an adventure in taste and temporary art. The vibrant colors of the gum strips matched their fruity flavors, making each piece a visual and taste sensation. The inclusion of temporary tattoos in each pack added to its appeal, offering more than just a chewing experience. Despite its flavors being short-lived, Fruit Stripe Gum's vibrant packaging and the fun of the temporary tattoos have left a lasting impression on those who grew up with it, evoking fond memories of a simpler time when even a stick of gum could bring a burst of joy and color to a child's day.
Number 23. Bread and butter with sugar. Before cinnamon toast had a name, there was this: a slice of white bread spread thick with butter and covered in granulated sugar. Some families called it a sugar sandwich when they folded it in half. Others called it a piece. In the rural South and through the Appalachian hollows, mothers handed this to children and said, "Go play." The butter held the sugar in place. The bread was soft enough to eat without teeth. A widow in Harlan County, Kentucky, ate this every afternoon for years because it was the only sweet thing she could afford. She kept a small jar of sugar next to the bread box and a stick of margarine on the counter. 3 ingredients: No preparation beyond spreading and sprinkling. Less than 5 cents per serving even in the 1980s. Nutritionists would call it empty fuel. The woman who ate it every afternoon called it the only good thing in her day. Number 12 biscuit with cane syrup needed no recipe, just a leftover cat head biscuit from morning, gone cool on the back of the stove, split with a thumb, filled with a slow pour of sorghum from a tin with a hinged lid. The biscuit soaked it from the inside out. You held it over the sink because it ran. Some families pressed butter in first, so it sealed. Sorghum came from the community press, boiled down in iron kettles every fall. Mountain families relied on it as their primary sweetener because sugarcane never grew at that elevation. By the time the 1970s came around, you could still find Dixie Dew syrup in some cabinets, the label claiming it gave a biscuit a college education, and old-timers found it funny and a little sad that you now had to buy what always came from a neighbor's press. The after-school ritual that needed no permission and no dish went quiet after that. Cold leftover biscuits had their own logic in a southern kitchen. Breakfast biscuits were for the morning, but day-old biscuits were denser and slightly dried at the crust, better suited to cold butter and preserved fruit that made them an afternoon snack. You split them with your thumbs, never a knife. Cold butter went into the crumb and softened in seconds. Then a heavy spoon of fig or strawberry preserves from a mason jar put up in August. Across the South and into Appalachia, biscuit making was the skill that separated a real cook from someone who could just follow directions. You learned by feel, by the look of the dough, by how it pulled from the bowl. The preserves came from fruit grown close by or given as a gift. Both skills, the biscuit and the put-up fruit, began leaving kitchens in the 1980s as convenience baking and store-bought jam made the from-scratch versions feel unnecessary. They were not unnecessary. Number 16. Poke salad. In April, when the first green shoots pushed through the forest floor, families went out to pick poke. The young leaves of the pokeweed plant were free food, growing wild along fence rows and creek banks. Pokeweed is toxic, though. The mature leaves and berries contain compounds that can make a person seriously ill. The trick was to pick only the youngest shoots, no more than 6 inches tall, and boil them in 3 changes of water to draw out the toxins. After the third boiling, the greens were safe. People ate them fried in bacon grease with a little salt, sometimes with a fried egg on top. In the coal camps of eastern Kentucky, poke salad was the first fresh green food people ate after a long winter of canned goods and dried beans. It tasted like spring. It tasted like the end of something hard and the beginning of something easier. Number 15. Dandelion greens with vinegar and bacon grease. In April and May, the front yards of rural families across Appalachia became a free food source. The young dandelion greens, picked before they flowered, the older ones turned too bitter, got washed and dressed in a skillet with hot bacon grease and a splash of apple cider vinegar, sometimes with a little sugar to balance the acid. In 1937, the USDA published a bulletin recommending dandelion greens for low-income households, calling them among the most nutrient-rich wild plants available. Your grandmothers had understood this for generations before any government publication said so. A woman in Mingo County, West Virginia, described going out to pick greens with her mother in the 1940s and continuing the tradition into the 1960s, not because times were hard, but because that was what spring tasted like, free and in season and better than most things your family could have bought. Number 24. Milk toast. Before cereal boxes lined every shelf, milk toast was what landed in front of children on cold mornings. Toast the bread until it was sturdy. Warm a cup of milk over low heat. Pour the milk over the toast in a shallow bowl and finish with a pat of butter that melted into a slow yellow puddle. Some households added a pinch of salt. Others sprinkled cinnamon sugar across the top for a child running a fever. By the 1930s, milk toast had earned a second name in American kitchens: sick room food. It was soft enough for a grandmother with no teeth, mild enough for a toddler with an upset stomach, and cheap enough for a widow stretching her last quart of milk through the week. The dish disappeared from menus when sugary cereals arrived in the 1950s, but seniors today bring it back the moment a head cold hits. Number 23, dried corn soup. After the last ears of summer corn came off the stalks, women across the hill country of Pennsylvania and West Virginia cut the kernels thin and laid them out to dry on old window screens set in the sun. By October, the kernels had shriveled to hard, pale chips with a concentrated sweetness that fresh corn never had. Come November, a handful went into a pot of water with a piece of side meat, an onion, and nothing else. The pot simmered all afternoon while your grandmother worked at something else. By supper, the dried kernels had swollen back up and turned the broth milky and thick. In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, among Mennonite and Pennsylvania Dutch families, this was called dried corn soup, and it appeared every winter without fail. The flavor was not like canned corn. It was deeper, almost nutty, the way something tastes when summer has been cooked down to its most honest form. One pot. No stove skill required beyond patience. The women who made it were alive to the fact that summer did not last. They made it last anyway. The recipe card said it in capital letters, sometimes underlined, "Do not peek." That was the entire technique, printed in church cookbooks across the Midwest from the 1950s through the 70s. Chicken thighs buried under 2 cups of dry rice, a packet of Lipton onion soup mix, introduced by the company in 1952 and immediately adopted by home cooks who understood what dehydrated onion could do, water added to the fill line, lid on, and nothing else for 3 hours. Lifting that lid released the steam that cooked the rice, and if the rice went wrong, there was no fixing it. No peeking wasn't a suggestion. It was a rule backed by the ruined batches that came before it. When the lid finally came off, the rice was fluffy and toasted at the bottom, and the chicken had given everything into the pot. She made this every Wednesday. Not because it was her favorite, but because Wednesday was her meeting night, and this dish required absolutely nothing from her once she pressed the lid down. Number 22, cold meatloaf sandwich with mustard. Sunday's loaf became Monday's lunch. A thick gray slab between 2 slices of buttered bread, a smear of brown German mustard, wrapped in wax paper and tucked into the bottom of a black domed pail. A construction foreman in Cleveland in 1958 unwrapped his at the bottom of a foundation hole on East 9th Street and ate it on a stack of rebar with a transistor radio in his coat pocket. The grease had bled into the bread by 10 o'clock, and that was the part you saved for last because the soaked corner tasted better than the meat. The wife who packed it had stretched 2 pounds of ground chuck with a sleeve of cracker meal, a yellow onion, and 2 eggs, so the loaf could feed the family of 6 at supper and her husband at noon the next day. 2 meals from 1 pan. And that was the whole math of the working week. Meatless meatballs were a creative and thrifty alternative to traditional meatballs, made primarily from vegetables, breadcrumbs, and eggs. These meatless versions helped families reduce their reliance on expensive meat by using ingredients like grated carrots, zucchini, or beans, combined with seasonings and binders to create a satisfying texture. Once shaped into balls, they were baked or fried and served with sauces or pasta, mimicking the appearance and taste of meat-based dishes. Meatless meatballs were especially popular during periods of financial constraint or meat shortages, allowing households to enjoy familiar comfort foods on a budget. They also reflected growing interest in vegetarian options within economically limited kitchens. These dishes demonstrated how resourcefulness and adaptation helped preserve family traditions while managing limited resources. Many who grew up with meatless meatballs recall them fondly as inventive and filling meals that showed how to make every ingredient count. Molasses cookies were the sweet tradition that survived when sugar became too expensive for Christmas baking. Blackstrap molasses cost less than refined sugar and was available at every country store, giving these cookies their dark color and robust flavor. The dough was mixed by hand in wooden bowls, combining flour, lard, or bacon drippings, eggs, and generous molasses until it formed a sticky, fragrant mass. Ginger, cinnamon, and cloves were added when available, transforming simple ingredients into something that tasted like the holidays. Cookies baked on greased pans until edges crisped and centers stayed soft, filling kitchens with spiced aroma children would remember for decades. Mothers made batches large enough to share with neighbors and to leave out for relatives. The dark sweetness hit the tongue differently than sugar, deeper, almost earthy, with mineral notes that tasted like comfort. Molasses cookies proved Christmas could still taste special, even when pennies stretched impossibly far. Cornmeal drop dumplings in broth were a warm meal born from desperation and a little genius. When meat was scarce and soup looked too thin, a quick cornmeal batter could save dinner. You'd mix cornmeal with water or milk, pinch off little balls, and drop them into bubbling broth to puff and soak up the flavor. They came out soft, dense, and delicious, tiny golden pillows floating in the pot. The smell of simmering broth filled the house, carrying a quiet promise that everyone would eat tonight. It was the kind of recipe that stretched the smallest pot of soup into something that could feed a family. Some added onions or pepper, others just relied on the broth to do the heavy lifting. Either way, it worked. Cornmeal drop dumplings didn't just fill bellies, they lifted spirits. They were proof that a handful of meal and water could turn hunger into gratitude. Cucumber vinegar salad was a refreshing Depression-era side dish that added brightness to otherwise plain meals. Cucumbers were easy to grow in home gardens, and when combined with vinegar, water, and a pinch of sugar or salt, they became a simple but flavorful salad. Thinly sliced and chilled if possible, the cucumbers soaked up the tangy brine and provided crunch. For families living on beans, bread, and potatoes, this salad was a welcome change in texture and taste. It required almost no cooking, which was another benefit when fuel and time were scarce. Often served in large bowls at supper, it gave the sense of a fresh vegetable dish without requiring expensive ingredients. Sometimes onions or dill were added, but the core recipe was basic and thrifty. For many households, cucumber vinegar salad was a reminder that gardening and resourcefulness could provide something close to luxury in the hardest times. Powdered cheese rice came straight from the era of boxed dinners and instant fixes. When the macaroni ran out but that bright orange packet of cheese dust was still sitting in the box, you made do. You'd toss it into a pot of leftover rice with a splash of milk or margarine, stir until everything turned creamy, and serve it like it was gourmet. It was the taste of the 1980s on a budget. Salty, neon orange, and undeniably satisfying. Parents knew it would fill stomachs fast, and kids didn't know they were eating leftovers dressed up as something special. You could stretch one box of mac and cheese into 3 nights of dinners if you were smart about it. That glowing cheese powder had a power of its own. It made anything feel a little indulgent, even plain rice. Powdered cheese rice was comfort disguised as convenience, a hack born from necessity and nostalgia.
Marathon bars hitting the shelves in 1973 stretched the very fabric of snack time with their ruler-embellished packaging and a generous 8-inch span of deliciousness. The long-lasting chew of Marathon bars offered consumers a unique and satisfying snacking experience. The combination of caramel and chocolate in a substantial, satisfying bar set it apart from other candy options. Its tagline, "Lasts a good long time," and distinctive packaging made it memorable. Despite being discontinued in the late 80s, Marathon bars are still fondly remembered for their size, taste, and innovative marketing, embodying the era's penchant for snacks that offered something extra.
Number 18, mayonnaise sandwich. 2 slices of white bread with a thick layer of mayonnaise. Nothing else. If you grew up with money, this sounds like a joke. If you grew up without it, this sounds like Tuesday. During the Depression, mayonnaise sandwiches were the lunch that children carried to school when there was nothing else in the house. The bread provided bulk. The mayonnaise provided fat and flavor. The whole thing cost almost nothing and could be assembled in the time it took to open the jar. By the 1970s and 1980s, seniors who had grown up eating these never stopped. A retired seamstress in Baltimore ate a mayonnaise sandwich for lunch almost every day. She added a thin slice of onion when she had one. She said the onion made it fancy. A jar of store-brand mayonnaise cost 79 cents and lasted weeks. 2 slices of bread cost a few pennies. This was a snack that poverty invented and habit preserved. Pulled bologna from the jar was a transaction you understood before you could read the handwritten price on the lid. The gallon glass jar sat on the counter of every Mountain General store. Dense rings of bologna in pale pink brine, A pair of tongs that you worked yourself, fishing out a thick slice and laying it on a soda cracker. The bologna went soft in the brine, turned sour and spongy, the vinegar tang cutting through the fat in a way no fresh deli slice could. A nickel, sometimes a dime by the end of the decade. Old men argued about whose brine was best. There were strong opinions. A general store owner in Pike County, Kentucky, reportedly never wrote down his pickling recipe, and when he died, his regulars grieved in a way that surprised their families. It was just bologna. Everyone who had ever stood at that counter knew it was not just bologna. The jar disappeared when the stores closed. Nothing replaced either. Frozen orange juice popsicles made in ice cube trays with toothpicks came out of the post-war American kitchen, where the chest freezer was new and the idea of making your own frozen treats was still a genuine discovery. You poured diluted Minute Maid concentrate into each slot, 1 can concentrate, 3 cans water, pressed a flat toothpick into the center, and carried the tray level to the freezer. The trick was the toothpick standing straight before the juice started setting. Minute Maid had introduced frozen concentrated orange juice commercially in 1946, a technology developed during World War II to ship juice to troops overseas without spoilage, and by the 1980s it sat in nearly every American freezer. Otter Pops and Fudgsicles were the commercial replacement, cheaper, already frozen, but they tasted like approximations. The toothpick version tasted like what you'd poured into a glass that morning. The real thing, just colder. Number 14, sassafras tea. In the early spring, before the trees fully leafed out, children in the mountains dug sassafras roots from the edges of fields and woods. The roots were easy to spot because the whole plant smelled like root beer. You washed them, cut them into pieces, and boiled them in a pot of water until the liquid turned a deep reddish brown. Then you added sugar or honey and drank it warm or let it cool. Sassafras tea was free. It grew everywhere. And it tasted exactly like root beer because root beer was originally made from sassafras. In the 1960s, every child in rural Appalachia knew how to find a sassafras tree. They knew it by the smell, by the mitten-shaped leaves, by the way the bark peeled. Grandmothers said it purified the blood. Whether that was true did not matter. What mattered was that a child could walk into the woods with nothing and come back with something that tasted sweet and warm. That is what foraging meant to mountain children, not survival, discovery. Number 11. Kool-Aid powder eaten dry. Tear the corner off the packet. Pour a little of the colored powder into the palm. Lick it. This was not something any mother suggested. It was a child's invention, discovered when the water ran out or the weather was too cold to mix a pitcher or there was simply no patience for waiting. Children across the rural Midwest and the suburban South did this with Kool-Aid throughout the 1960s. A single packet cost a nickel. 5 cents for a full afternoon of tongue-staining, eye-watering, intensely sour and sweet powder eaten straight from the paper, mixed with a little sugar from the other palm if prepared. Eaten plain if not. Cherry was the most popular. Grape was the most intense. The whole ritual turned lips red or purple or green depending on the flavor. Not one adult in your life would have endorsed this snack. That was exactly why children loved it. It was entirely theirs. Number 18. Biscuits and white gravy. Few breakfasts have carried more workers to more shifts than biscuits and white gravy. The gravy is a roux of bacon drippings and flour whisked over low heat until the flour turns the color of buttermilk. Cold milk goes in next, a slow pour with constant stirring until the pan thickens into something a spoon stands up in. Salt and a heavy hand of black pepper finish the work. The biscuits underneath were day-old, split open and warmed on the stove. The dish came up from the logging camps of the Carolinas in the 1880s, traveled west with the railroads, and settled into every truck stop diner between Knoxville and Amarillo by 1935. Seniors who grew up on a farm remember it as the breakfast that filled a man before sunrise and held him until lunch. Number 18. Potato and onion skillet hash. 4 potatoes, 1 onion, bacon grease in the bottom of a cast iron skillet. Your mother sliced the potatoes thin so they cooked fast, laid them flat in the hot grease and pressed them down with a spatula, then left them alone long enough to brown before she turned them. The onions went in halfway through, softening and turning sweet against the crust that had formed on the potatoes. Salt, pepper. That was all it needed. One pan, one flame. Under a dime. Under a dime. Nothing wasted. In rural communities across Tennessee and Kentucky, fried potatoes and onions was the supper that appeared when there was nothing in the house but the potato sack and the onion bin. A pound of potatoes cost about 5 cents in 1964. The skillet was ready in 20 minutes. Everyone ate until the pan was clean. No stove required beyond a flame and patience. No pots to wash but one. During the worst years of the Depression, men riding freight rails kept alive on a stew with one rule: no one eats alone and everyone contributes something. One man had a potato from a church garden. Another had dried beans he'd been carrying for 3 days. A third had trapped a rabbit near the rail yard. Everything went into one pot over an open fire. Food historians trace the name mulligan to Irish-American working-class communities in the late 19th century, where communal one-pot cooking was the practical answer to tenement poverty. By the 1930s, it had entered Dust Bowl oral history, the dish you made together, using whatever existed, without asking what was in it. In the slow cooker, mulligan stew becomes almost dignified. Beef and chicken together, potatoes, corn, and lima beans, simmering 8 hours into one unified flavor. What those men cooked over fires in vacant lots, a potato here, a bone there, fed a family of 6 for under $2. Number 14. Pickle and cheese on saltines. A wedge of yellow rat-trap cheese cut thick with a paring knife, a slice of dill pickle from a mason jar in the cellar, and a stack of saltines held together with a brown rubber band. A Western electric assembly worker at the Hawthorne plant in Cicero, Illinois in 1936 packed this lunch every Friday for 9 years because the cheese had to go before the weekend and the pickle never went bad. You built each cracker on the workbench between batches of telephone relays. The cheese had cost 23 cents a pound. The pickles came from cucumbers grown in the garden behind the duplex on 22nd Place, packed in brine, dill, and garlic the second week of August. You stacked the empty saltine box on the windowsill, and your wife used it to mail birthday cards to the cousins back in Bohemia. Nothing in that house was thrown out until it had failed at 3 different jobs. Mock applesauce was a creative solution used by families who could not afford fresh apples or canned fruit during tough times. This substitute was made by cooking peeled potatoes with sugar, cinnamon, and a touch of lemon juice to mimic the texture and flavor of traditional applesauce. It offered a surprisingly close taste while being much cheaper and more accessible in many households. The recipe stretched basic ingredients into something sweet and familiar, helping families enjoy a comforting side without the cost. This clever dish highlights the ingenuity of resourceful cooks who transformed humble pantry staples into beloved treats. Many children grew up eating mock applesauce, often unaware of its unusual base, and it became a nostalgic flavor tied to thrift and survival. The dish's simplicity and frugality made it a staple in many kitchens, symbolizing how necessity breeds invention when resources are scarce. It was not just about eating, but about making the most of what was available during challenging economic times. Rice pudding with raisins turned leftover rice into Christmas dessert that felt far more special than ingredients suggested. When rice remained from previous meals, thrifty cooks transformed it by baking slowly with milk, eggs, sugar, and precious raisins saved for holiday baking. The pudding emerged from the oven golden and creamy, with plump raisins scattered throughout like treasure. Cinnamon and nutmeg added warmth that made the simple dish taste festive. Families served it warm or cold, sometimes with cream for those who could afford it. Children loved the sweetness and surprise of finding raisins in each bite, never realizing they were eating kitchen economy. The dish required no special equipment, just a baking dish and patience for slow cooking. Rice pudding represented the creative bridge between everyday leftovers and holiday celebration, proving that Christmas dessert did not require expensive ingredients, only knowledge of how to transform simple things into something worth remembering. Instant coffee meat rub was one of those oddball ideas that somehow worked. You'd mix instant coffee crystals with sugar, salt, and a pinch of flour, rub it on cheap cuts of meat, and throw it in the oven or pan. The coffee acted like a smoky glaze, turning the outside dark and caramelized while hiding the fact that the meat was tough as rubber. It was a poor man's barbecue, full of flavor and pride. Families used it for pork, chicken, or whatever protein happened to be on sale. The smell filled the house like something from a steakhouse, and everyone gathered around pretending it was a special occasion. Even if the meat was chewy, no one complained. The magic of that bittersweet crust fooled everyone into believing it was better than it was. It was one of those small miracles from a time when making dinner meant making do. Cabbage roll. Casserole was one of those Depression-era meals that made the most of scraps while still delivering real comfort to the table. Instead of carefully rolling leaves around bits of rice or meat, families would simply layer chopped cabbage with leftover grains, stale bread, and whatever scraps of vegetables they had. Sometimes there was even a small amount of ground pork or beef mixed in, though most of the time the casserole relied on stretching every flavor from the scraps themselves. A little vinegar or tomato juice added tang and moisture, while onions gave it a base of flavor. Once it baked, the entire dish came together into something hearty enough to serve a large family for very little money. The casserole was a dish that spoke to both ingenuity and the realities of the time, because not everyone could spare hours or meat for proper cabbage rolls. Layering scraps turned survival cooking into something close to celebration. Mustard green spaghetti was a southern experiment that worked better than it had any right to. You'd boil spaghetti noodles, toss them in a pan with wilted mustard greens, and hit it with a dash of hot sauce for punch. The greens were bitter, the pasta plain, but somehow it came together into something hearty and bold. It was the perfect marriage of Italian thrift and southern grit. Some folks added a spoonful of margarine to mellow the greens. Others went heavy on the spice to make it sing. It was an accidental recipe that spread through kitchens where fresh produce was rare and creativity was required. Mustard green spaghetti might sound strange to anyone who didn't live through lean years, but for those who did, it was genius. It filled your stomach and left you proud you'd made something out of almost nothing. It was humble food with heart, and that made it better than any restaurant plate.
In the 1970s, Figurines diet bars were at the forefront of the health and fitness trend, offering a snack option that didn't compromise on taste. Their slim profile and diet-friendly branding catered to a growing awareness of health and nutrition. These bars provided a guilt-free way to indulge in flavors like chocolate, vanilla, and peanut butter, appealing to those conscious of their dietary choices. Figurines stood out for their focus on calorie control and convenience, marking a significant moment in the evolution of diet snacks. Today, they are remembered for their role in shaping a more health-conscious approach to snacking, blending the desire for indulgence with the need for balance.
Number 17. Cornbread in buttermilk. You crumbled leftover cornbread into a tall glass, poured cold buttermilk over it, and ate it with a spoon. In the South, this was not strange. This was supper. Farmers ate it after a day in the field. Grandmothers ate it before bed. Seniors living alone ate it whenever the kitchen felt too hot to turn on the stove. The cornbread was already made. The buttermilk was already cold. The whole thing came together in less than a minute, and the tartness of the buttermilk against the crumbly sweetness of the cornbread was a flavor that tasted like every back porch in the rural South from the 1930s through the 1970s. A box of cornmeal cost 39 cents in 1975. Buttermilk was 45 cents a quart. A single batch of cornbread made in a cast iron skillet could feed a person for 3 or 4 days, and the buttermilk kept it from going dry. Your grandfather did not need a recipe for this. He needed a glass. One. Salt-rising bread was not made on a schedule. It rose when it wanted to. An honest description of bread that relied on naturally occurring bacteria captured in cornmeal, milk, and salt, left to ferment overnight near the wood stove. The smell alarmed anyone who had not grown up with it. Sharp, cheesy, faintly like old feet. And that smell meant it was working. Baked, the crumb was dense and tangy, the structure tight enough to toast to a hard golden crunch. Buttered while hot, it was an event. Salt-rising bread originated in Appalachia as a solution to expensive commercial yeast, and mountain bakers in West Virginia and Kentucky had kept the skill alive since before the Civil War. By the 1970s, the women who still made it by feel, reading the smell to know if the ferment had turned, were running short on apprentices. You did not learn it from a cookbook. You stood in the kitchen and watched and smelled, or you never learned at all. Pizza toast on white bread was what every American kid made in the years before bagel bites, and it was better in every way that mattered. You spread contadina or Hunt's tomato paste, not pizza sauce, not marinara, but the concentrated paste from the small can, across a slice of white bread, covered it with shredded mozzarella, and slid it under the broiler. 4 minutes watching. The cheese went from white to spotted to pulling away at the corners, and when it browned at the edges while still soft in the center, it was ready. Bagel Bites launched in 1985, created by two brothers in Hallandale, Florida, and within a few years became the commercial standard for after-school pizza snacking. Before that, the pizza toast was what you made yourself, how much paste, how thick the cheese, whether to shake oregano from the jar above the stove. The homemade version didn't disappear because it was inferior. It disappeared because the commercial one required no watching. Number 15. Vienna sausages and crackers. A small can of Armor Star. Vienna sausages cost about 15 cents in 1961. A box of Saltine crackers cost a quarter and lasted a week. Together, they were the universal snack of every country store and coal camp commissary in Appalachia. You opened the can with the key soldered to the bottom, peeled back the lid, and fished out the little sausages with your fingers or a pocket knife. They were soft, pink, and packed in a salty broth. You put one on a cracker and ate it in 2 bites. Nobody pretended they were good. Nobody claimed they tasted like real sausage. But they were cheap, available, and required no cooking, no refrigeration, and no cleanup. In the hollows of Appalachia, where the nearest hot meal might be hours away, that was enough. Number 10. Apple slices with salt. A late summer and fall tradition in farm communities from the Ozarks to the Blue Ridge. An apple from the yard or the cellar, peeled, sliced thin, laid on a plate with a small dish of salt on the side. Each slice got dipped, and the salt drew out the apple's juice and sharpened its sweetness in a way that tasted almost savory. In the Piedmont communities of western North Carolina, families sat on the porch in September and passed around salted apple slices while the afternoon cooled. This was the simple, free thing between the end of the workday and the start of supper. The apples cost nothing if a family had a tree, and most rural families did. A dish of salt cost nothing extra. No stove, no pot, no preparation beyond a knife and a steady hand. That was the whole snack, and if you try it today, it still works. Number 17. Hot dog goulash. This is the trick the intro promised, the one that takes 1 hot dog and feeds 6. The recipe came out of Pittsburgh kitchens in the 1930s and spread along the Allegheny by way of mill workers' lunch buckets. 1 frankfurter sliced into 30 thin coins, a pound of elbow macaroni, a can of crushed tomatoes, an onion chopped fine. The onion softened in a hot skillet, then the hot dog coins browned in the released oil. The tomatoes went in, then the macaroni, and the pan got a slow stir until the sauce coated every noodle. The single hot dog dispersed across the pot, and every bowl ended up with 5 or 6 coins of meat. The dish fed a family of 6 for under 30 cents and showed up in church potluck rotations into the 1960s. Number 16. Hamburger gravy over rice. A quarter pound of ground beef, browned in the skillet with a diced onion until it broke into crumbles. A spoonful of flour stirred in to make a roux with the drippings. Beef broth or water added slowly, stirred until a thin brown gravy formed around the meat. Poured over white rice that had been cooked while the gravy came together. In the farming communities of the Mississippi Delta and the rural counties of Arkansas, this was called hamburger gravy, and it was understood that 1/4 pound of meat could feed a family of 5 over rice without anyone walking away hungry. Ground beef cost 49 cents a pound in 1965. A cup of dry rice cost less than a dime. 4 people full for under 30 cents a serving. There is no restaurant in America that has figured out how to charge for that ratio. There never will be. The math doesn't work in their favor. And that same knowledge, what a discarded cut could become after a full day in the pot, lived most powerfully in ham hocks, slow-cooked with turnip greens until the pot liquor ran dark as strong tea and the greens had surrendered every bit of bitterness to the cured meat. Ham hocks are the smoked, cured lower leg joints of a pig. Bone, cartilage, thin flesh, sold cheap because they needed 8 hours of low, slow heat to become edible. The pot liquor, the dark, mineral-rich liquid left in the crock when the greens were done, was consumed separately, ladled over cornbread or drunk straight from a cup because the old women knew it held everything the greens had released. You never discarded pot liquor. That was not a preference. It was law, passed down without being written. If you had to ask whether you could throw it out, you hadn't grown up in the right kitchen. She never measured a thing she put in that pot. Nobody who made this well ever did. Cabbage and potato slaw was a cold side dish combining shredded cabbage and diced potatoes tossed in a light, tangy dressing. This inexpensive salad was popular for its fresh texture and ability to accompany heavier dishes, offering balance on the plate. The combination made use of affordable, readily available vegetables that could be prepared in large quantities to feed families and social gatherings. Cabbage and potato slaw was often flavored with vinegar, sugar, and mustard, giving it a bright, slightly sweet flavor. Served chilled, it was perfect for summer meals or potluck tables, adding crunch and variety. This dish showcased how humble ingredients could be elevated with simple preparation to create satisfying flavors and textures. For many who grew up with limited means, cabbage and potato slaw was a familiar and comforting part of everyday meals that brought freshness and nourishment to the table. Oatmeal pie emerged as the poor family's answer to pecan pie, substituting humble oats for nuts that had become impossibly expensive. The filling combined oats with corn syrup or molasses, eggs, butter, and vanilla, creating texture and sweetness remarkably similar to pecan pies wealthier families enjoyed. Baked until the top turned golden and slightly crunchy, while the interior stayed gooey, oatmeal pie delivered satisfaction exceeding its modest cost. The recipe spread through communities where pecan trees did not grow and store-bought nuts were beyond family budgets. Women shared it at church gatherings, proud of solving the problem of making fancy pie without fancy ingredients. Children receiving a slice at Christmas dinner experienced the same joy as those eating the original. Oatmeal pie represented both practical necessity and culinary creativity, proving that substitution could produce something genuinely delicious and teaching families that holiday traditions could be maintained regardless of economic circumstances. Mock banana pudding was the sort of dish that showed just how inventive Depression-era cooks could be when real ingredients were simply out of reach. Bananas, once imported luxuries, quickly became too expensive for families to buy. To make up for it, people leaned on banana extract, which could be purchased cheaply and used sparingly to add flavor, layered with homemade custard, when eggs and milk could be spared, and stacked between vanilla wafers or leftover bits of stale cake. The pudding felt surprisingly close to the original. Families would chill it in an icebox if they had one, though often it was served warm right from the stove. For children, it was a rare treat that offered the illusion of a fruit dessert, even if no fresh fruit was present. In many homes, mock banana pudding became a stand-in for celebration desserts, stretching scarce supplies into something families could still enjoy together, and for many, it carried the sweetness of hope itself. Biscuit dough pizza boats turned canned biscuits into dinner for a crowd. You'd flatten each one into a little bowl, spoon on tomato sauce from a jar, sprinkle shredded cheese, and maybe add a slice of pepperoni if you were feeling fancy. Pop them in the oven and watch as they puffed and browned, smelling like pizza night on a dime. Kids loved them because they were small enough to hold, and parents loved them because they cost next to nothing. They looked cute, tasted amazing, and disappeared before they even cooled. It was the kind of meal you could make out of leftovers and pantry scraps without needing a recipe card. The 1980s were full of little tricks like this, turning store-brand dough and canned goods into a moment of joy. Biscuit dough pizza boats weren't just food, they were a celebration of what imagination could do on a shoestring budget. Every one of those snacks came from a kitchen where money was tight and mothers were creative. Bread, grease, sugar, and whatever the pantry had left, that is what fed a generation of American children. Most of it disappeared when convenience stores and packaged food took over, but the memory of standing at that counter, waiting for something simple and warm that never goes away. If one of these brought back a memory, leave it in the comments. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is a good time.